house?
Yes, I am. Oh. Hello, I think we're live now.
Good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're tuning in. Welcome to our second Coffee Conversations. And I am very honored to be talking to my big boss, a very good friend as well, Greg. Very warm welcome.
Larissa, we should tell the world the truth. I am the godfather of your little boy, and I'm very proud of that.
Oh, yes, you are. Thank you. That's very true. Yeah. Very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us today. It's going to be a journey of discovery. Many people are very interested to know your story, to know who you are, what you do. And people also have a lot of questions for you, so I hope you are ready. Also to remind people that we have giveaways. We have questions and giveaways at the end of the live, so stay tuned. So yeah, let's get down to it. I'll start by asking, who is Greg Carr?
Greg Carr, born and raised in the Rocky Mountains of the Western United States, Idaho, where we have a magnificent wilderness. I'm part of a big family. My mother is watching this program right now. And I guess I was born in the days when kids just played outside in the backyard. That's what you did. And you invented your own fun, and you made forts, and there was no electronic media. But from the backyard of my house in Idaho, I could actually see the top of the Grand Teton Mountain just across the border in Wyoming, which is the gateway to Yellowstone National Park. So I think I grew up loving national parks, loving the outdoors. Mom and Dad took us fishing and camping, and I think that that was formative for me.
And as a child, was this a passion? What was your passion? What were your dreams as a child?
I think at one time or another I had every imaginable dream. I mean, that was the problem, I guess, is I had no idea what I wanted to do in life. But I knew I'd end up inside, an office 8 hours a day. I'm too restless. I'm always moving. I need to be exploring and searching. And I'll admit that I did not imagine that I would end up spending the second 40 years of my life in Africa, but it's not entirely surprising. We grew up with the National Geographic magazine on our coffee table. We grew up. Oh, speaking of coffee, I hope you're all drinking Gorongosa coffee. That's the commercial message. Okay, we grew up with National Geographic magazine on our coffee table, and the National Geographic specials on TV. Probably my favorite program. I can still remember the music. Da, 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 da. And then you knew that you were about to go into a journey. The best ones were always in Africa, a continent that I love. So although I couldn't have anticipated it as a child, I am thrilled that that I am able to spend the better part of 4 decades in Africa, in Mozambique.
Good. We're also very glad you are doing it. And during this whole time, your lifetime, has anything like this pandemic happened? Do you recall anything like this coronavirus before?
This is not like anything that any person alive today has ever experienced. And the closest thing that I can think of was a local event, not a worldwide event, not even a national event. It was a local event. When I was a teenager, there was a dam that broke, a big dam about 50 miles north of our town broke. And all of a sudden, we all realized that a massive flood was coming our way. And we had about 24 hours to prepare. And the entire community rallied as a single unit. And we were all out sandbagging everybody's houses. And that was a moment where I thought, wow, the world is not what I thought. You know, in 1 minute, the world can become different. Now that local flood has nothing to do with a worldwide pandemic other than the mental experience of realizing that we're blessed every single day when we can live safely and with health, and we need to really enjoy that blessing, because obviously at any given moment, someone somewhere in the world is not enjoying that blessing.
That's true. That's true. And how has it affected you personally?
This pandemic has the blessing, the upside, I guess, is that I have been quarantined with my mother in Idaho, and we've had a lot of quality time together, a lot of conversations, looking up in some old family books, photographs, and watching some quality programs on TV, and so that's a blessing. And I have heard from a lot of people that have said, you know what, we've actually had some family time, some quality time.
That's true. That's true.
You probably are enjoying that with your husband, your child, your parents. So, you know, we can look on our right side. The other thing that we've done in Gorongosa, people quarantined from Brazil to Seattle to Portland, Oregon, to the United Kingdom, where Dominic Gonçalves, I think, might be watching this program today, and in a lot of other countries, including, of course, Mozambique. We've had people quarantined all over the world, and we've decided to use that time to create a 30-year vision for Gorongosa, and not just for Gorongosa Park, but for the entire area around it. We call Greater Gorongosa. What do we want it to look like in the year 2050? What is our dream for the natural ecosystem, for the park, for elephants, for lions? What is our dream for the people who live around us? So it's actually been incredibly productive. We've all been writing different parts of this document. It ended up being 236 pages long, and then we realized that it wasn't finished. That was like draft one, and we're now going to keep working on it for the rest of the year. But one of the big questions that we're all asking is, in the year 2050, what is our dream for the people, about 250,000 people who live around Gorongosa National Park? What do we want? Do we want all of them to live in a nice house or a nice apartment? Their children are going to good schools with good teachers? Do they have a variety of economic opportunities, employment, whether it's in services or manufacturing or other categories of employment? And if we dream that, how do we help make that happen?
How does one make a 30-year vision or plan?
Well, you start with the first 5 years, actually. And so we did a lot of detail on the next 5 years.
Okay.
But if you're going to do the next 5 years, you need to at least have a distant horizon. You at least need to have what's called a visualization of what it could look like in 30 years. But what do we have to do in the next 5 years? And we did set one goal, which is to build 40 primary schools. And
wow, that's amazing.
We have a grant from the United States government to help do that. So we'll need to build 6 or 8 schools a year at least.
Okay.
And something else exciting happened. There's a town right next to Gorongosa National Park. It's called Villa Gorongosa.
Yes.
Kind of the gateway town for the national park. And it has a really smart, charismatic Mozambican mayor, a man named Sabetti. Mm-hmm. And he and I have been exchanging emails, and we've decided to make Villa Gorongosa, or Gorongosa Town in English, into a model city. So the 2050 vision is, what does it mean to have a model city in rural Africa? We want it to be clean and safe and green. We want good jobs. So we want to take care of rubbish, and have clean electricity and good hospitals. And this guy's really smart, really ambitious. So we'll work with him over the coming year or so. I already have the United Nations excited to help us. There's an organization called UN Habitat. A lot of people haven't heard of it, but it's a part of the UN that helps design good cities. And they're super nice, super smart people. I've been interacting with them on email as well. So imagine a year from now, we could put out a document that says 30-year vision for the town of Gorongosa, and then we just start doing it step by step. We already know what step one is, which is we're going to improve a high school. It's actually called Nelson Mandela High School, coincidentally, which
very nice.
I'm excited about, because I met Nelson Mandela once, and he was one of my inspirations for the Gorongosa project.
For the whole project, actually. Yeah, that's true.
You know, most people know the story of Nelson Mandela. They know that he spent 37 years in prison on Robben Island, and they know that part of his story. They know that he was a liberator of freedom, and they know his politics. But what they may not know about Nelson Mandela is that he loved national parks. He loved wilderness. He loved the outdoors. And Nelson Mandela got out of prison in 1990. He did not become president of South Africa until 1994. So what was he doing during those 4 years? Well, guess what? He spent a lot of time outdoors after being locked away for
exactly. One would imagine.
National parks and nature reserves in South Africa, and he drove around looking at them. He loved them, of course, but he said, you know, there's a problem here. He said, these are not inclusive. You know, he didn't see any tourists that were Black. You know, he just saw white people,
the locals,
and employees, you know, and so forth. And he said, but he saw something else, which was really insightful, considering how many decades ago this was. He said, these national parks are not helping the communities that live right next door. And they should, because they're sharing an ecosystem. And he said, you know, national parks really ought to turn their faces toward the local communities, engage with them, help them. So he gave a speech on television in 1992. I have the transcript of it, where he said, people who do conservation need to do human development at the same time. Let's not think of these as two different activities. Let's see it as a unified whole. You know, that healthy people need a healthy environment, and unless that environment is delivering benefits to people, why are they going to try to protect it? So he was one of the early visionaries, really, to see how it all fits together. So when I signed the contract in 2008 to work with the government of Mozambique to restore Gorongosa and to help the people who live next to Gorongosa, the most amazing, shocking day of my life, I was contacted by Nelson Mandela, and that very same month, January of 2008, and I walked into his office, and he looked at me and he smiled, and he just envelops you with love and warmth. He was about 92 then. It was an unbelievable experience. And he said, "Como vai Gorongosa?" You know, how's Gorongosa going?
Wow.
Yeah. And he asked me for my business card. He says, "Can I have your card?"
Did you have a card in hand?
Fortunately, I had a Gorongosa business card with an elephant on it, and I gave it to him.
Wow, great.
So, you know, we feel that we're following not only his inspiration, but the inspiration of the former president of your country, a man named Chisano, who also loves national parks, but also saw the connection that you need the people who live next to a national park to have employment, to benefit from it,
to be part of the whole process, I think.
He's still alive,
Yeah.
President Chissano, and he's, I guess, probably getting close to 80, but he's still involved in national parks. It's a deep passion for him. And back when he was president of your country, Larissa, he used to ask all of the civil servants, even the soldiers in the military, to meditate every day and to try to go outside in nature and meditate. Now, that's an unusual president, but he saw the spiritual values of nature.
Yeah. And respecting it, of course, because one thing is to acknowledge, and the other thing is to actually do something about it. And I think that's what he did when he also got in touch with you to try and come in and restore the park.
Yes, it was President Chissano who actually invited me to Mozambique, invited me to get involved. And something that I really respect and love about the Mozambicans, that would include you, Larissa, is
Woo-hoo, that's good.
that
Thank you.
Mozambicans have a deep spirituality, and I should let you explain it instead of me, but I'm just telling you what I observe.
Okay.
Mozambicans have a deep spirituality connected to nature. And I mean, maybe I'm going to turn the tables on you. And could you have a sentence or two about that? Like, how do you explain the respect and love that that your culture has?
I think in general, it's the traditions that we had with animals and totems, that you have an animal that you respect and he's somehow part of your family. And my family totem is a zebra, and I just love zebras and I respect those animals. And I guess in the sense of the communities, they wouldn't hunt these animals that are like they totem, and they respect and they do everything in the sense to elevate and make sure that these are uplifted, I would say.
Yes, and there's something else that we do. It's my favorite moment of the year. When we open the national park each year, Gorongosa, we sit around a tree with your local leaders. It includes women and men, and they say a prayer. Yeah. And I'm incredibly humbled and thrilled that they let me sit in that circle with them.
You were part of the family now, and what normally happens in these traditional ceremonies is we give some alcohol to the ancestors, and we talk to them. We thank them for everything they've done in the previous year, and wishing for the best for the next year. So it's just having this contact with them, and of course, there's alcohol involved.
Well, I can't comment on your ancestors and why they want some alcohol, but I can tell you that nothing would make me happier than to sit around a tree outdoors and share a spiritual moment, a moment of reflection and respect and love with my Mozambican friends. And I hope that tradition continues for 1,000 years, and I suspect it will.
I think it will. And as you said in the beginning, you were born in an era that kids would play outside and be outdoors and go on hikings to the mountain. And I think this is starting to get back, and especially for Mozambicans, because we didn't have a place to go. So now Gorongosa is open, it's restored, and we have the chance to do these things. And I think it's our responsibility as parents to ensure that we take our kids to do these things. We are now more outdoors as well, instead of the technology and the phones all the time. So if we have places like that, and I think it encourages people to be more outdoors and restore and conserve the environment, to ensure that we actually have these places to visit.
Well, you're right, Larissa, and I've read some articles that people say that there's actually something called nature deficit disorder. You know, people who never go outside, they live inside, they're constantly surrounded by, you know, so-called concrete jungle, and actually it's not healthy. I mean, we need grass, we need trees. In fact, I just read a book about trees, and they say that trees are giving off certain smells and different things that psychologically we need just to be mentally healthy and happy. You know, you walk, walk through the forest and really wonderful things are happening to you. So we do need to all get outside. And if I don't know if you can you, I'm turning my computer. Can you see that post behind me?
It depends what you're talking about.
That wood pillar that's directly.
Oh, yes, of course.
Behind my head. Okay.
Yeah.
That pillar looks like a tree, doesn't it?
It does. So you have a big tree inside your house.
That was intentional. The architecture of this house, inside the house, all the pillars are meant to resemble a tree. And the idea of this architecture is to say that indoors and outdoors ought to merge. And that you can look through my windows and see trees, but you can also see a reminder of trees inside the house.
Inside. Oh, that's great, especially in winter when you can't go much outside.
When and around here, you look outside in winter and it's entirely white.
White, I can imagine.
But anyway, I this is one of the great blessings of national parks is. We do need large, intact wilderness, and not just for the thousands and thousands of other species that live there, but we need it for ourselves.
Exactly.
And I can tell you how many people, friends of mine or people I don't know, who come to Gorongosa on safari. They come with their families for a week. They're tourists, and at the end of that week, very often I've had people say, "Greg, you know what? This changed me." I thought it was going to be fun and I was excited to see an elephant and this and that, but they go, no, it was more than that. Like, this changed me.
Yeah.
And it changes families when they come to Gorongosa. Families fall in love again, and it's.
Are you hinting something there?
I mean, not that they weren't in love already, but. Going out and having this once in a lifetime experience, on safari, is a really wonderful way for a family to bond.
And I think different from other countries in the neighbors, like South Africa or Zimbabwe, Gorongosa is so raw and it's so unexplored, and it gives you that feeling that you are really in a jungle, and because we don't touch anything from there, it just gives you that feeling. And I know people always ask me, oh, how long is the safari? And I tell them, oh, it's 3 hours, and they're like, are we going to see lions and this and this and this? And I'm like, you are just going on a safari, enjoy it.
Well, and we only have dirt roads, and
exactly.
I went on safari with your parents and you and your husband and your boy, and I remember watching the sun go down over the water and singing. I think I'm a better singer than everyone else seems to think about me. I don't know why that is, but. Being out under the setting sun could cause anyone to want to sing. And I remember talking to your sister, whose name is Michelle. I hope she's watching today. Michelle is going to school at Boise State University. That's here in Idaho. I'm very proud of her. She's studying healthcare. And I was out on safari with her one day in Gorongosa, in central Mozambique. And I said, hey, Michelle, did you know that the Beatles have a song called Michelle? And I started to sing it. And she said, I said, have you heard the song Michelle? And she says, I haven't heard of the Beatles. Now, that was fascinating to me, because Michelle is an incredibly bright person, and she has perfect English, and she speaks a couple of other languages. So this was not a matter of her not being incredibly intelligent and well-read and everything else. It was a matter that she was born and raised in Mozambique, and I was born and raised in Idaho. So guess what? She's going to know all kinds of musicians I've never heard of.
Exactly.
My favorite group, the Beatles. But I loved that moment because it just said, you know, how big is this earth? And
oh yes.
Right. And how much we can share with each other.
Yeah.
And what a blessing that Mozambique still has its own culture that's developed for thousands of years. And something about Mozambicans is that they have a reverence for their culture, which means you're going to have to get to know them pretty well before they really start to spill all their secrets. I knew the park.
That's true.
Right. I think it is good because it shows that the culture is sacred to them, that they, and I knew our park warden, Pedro Magura, for more than 10 years.
Yeah.
Before he told me that the clan animal of his family was the painted wolf, also known as African wild dog. And he never told that to me. And the only reason he did tell me is that we were able to reintroduce the painted wolf to Gorongosa. It's supposed to be in Gorongosa, but they hadn't been seen in 30 years.
Yeah.
And he said to me, Greg, you know, I have not seen my own family's clan animal in more than 30 years. And he said that restoring Gorongosa, in Pedro's words, he says it's restoring my soul. And
that's deep.
That takes it a step beyond just understanding why we need biodiversity, you know, for reasons of our livelihood. But how about we need biodiversity for our souls?
That's true. That's true. It's going there and beyond. And did you ever think that Gorongosa project would be where it is now, ever since you started?
Here's what I think helps us, and here's where we're lucky. Anybody who goes to Gorongosa falls in love with it. And so I don't ever have to, you know, sell it, so to speak. I don't have to promote it. Therefore, we have attracted, I think, the best people in the world, including you, by the way. But, you know, the most talented Mozambicans, you know, people that some people may have seen in films like Dominique Gonçalves or Gabby, who's the first
female guide,
woman safari guide in the history of Gorongosa. Pedro Magura, who's probably planted more trees than any person in the world. So Gorongosa attracts talented people who come and make it succeed. So frankly, I don't feel like I'm, you know, pushing a stone uphill, just the opposite. I feel like, you know, it's the path is easy because we have such an extraordinary team.
Yeah, and with a great team, you also need money. Where does the money to fund all of these projects come from?
Well, that actually is something else that's been helpful, is that when potential donors come and they see Gorongosa, Gorongosa sells itself. We have a philosophy. We call ourselves a human rights park. And what does that mean? Well, it means a variety of things. It means that we're going to respect our employees. We're going to respect our neighbors. It means that we want 50% of all of our employees to be women. It means that we have the first ever women rangers in the history of Gorongosa, the first ever women tourism guides, safari guides. Half of our scientists are women. And we teach after school programs to the young girls that live in primary schools around Gorongosa. So I think when people come to Gorongosa, let's say representatives of the United States government or the Irish government, they fall in love with the wilderness and they're happy to see elephants and tiny little creatures have a home. But I think they also fall in love with what we call our human development programs and our pro-human approach to being a national park. And so we've had very generous donors. If you're watching this and you're a United States citizen, you should know that some of your tax dollars have been supporting us for 15 years. And the United States government has just tripled its support to us.
Thank you, Americans.
The Canadian government is going to start supporting us this year. The Irish government has supported us for many years. Norway has supported us. We've received money from the United Kingdom, some foundations. And here in Idaho, the Boise Zoo supports us. Isn't that exciting? And
that's amazing.
So we do get a lot of generous people giving donations. And we use that for all the things I've been talking here today. We use it when to protect the animals. We use it for education, training. We have a master's program. And I think it's only going to take us another 30 years, Larissa. And I'll be almost, let's see, I'll be 59, I think, by then. I don't have to do my math. But anyway.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what calculator are you using?
It's called Greg Math. It's a new.
Okay, good. Good.
But, 30 more years, and I think we're going to achieve all our dreams. So we need. Maybe it'll be your son Io, who's becomes.
Yeah, in 30 years, you will probably be 30. So I'm sure he's gonna be there doing something. So Greg, we have some questions from our listeners tuning in. We'll start from a question from John, and he says, Greg, what are you questioning most right now?
Well, it is a good question, because probably the most important thing that I can do is identify a trouble spot, right? I mean, we can always talk about things that are working well and things I'm proud of and things I'm happy about, but you do have to look out for trouble spots. I think that I'll be honest. I'll tell you what I've been reading about the last few weeks that has me really nervous. Climate change. Okay, I mean, I'm not going to avoid it. I'm nervous about that. This month's National Geographic, it's actually April National Geographic. If anybody have it available, read it. It's all about climate change. Now, it's not all negative. It says, here's the good stuff that can happen if we do the right thing. You know, if we all adopt clean energy and so forth. But if we don't do the right thing, here's what will happen. What makes me nervous would be Mozambique drying out in 30 years. What if we have more droughts, right? What if the rain stops falling? So I guess what I'm saying is, no matter how hard we work in Gorongosa, there's things that are bigger than us that can—
and out of our control.
Out of our control. So I've been reading a lot about forestry here in quarantine. I've been reading about how much carbon that a tree can sequester over its lifetime, and how if we make sure that the greater Gorongosa area is covered in forest, which it used to be, and we've lost that forest. If it's covered in forest, forests actually keep the rain falling, because the right moisture is evaporated out of a tree, it goes up, and then it comes right back down again in rain. In other words, Gorongosa can create its own weather. So I've decided that we don't have enough to do with our 36 different programs, and I think we're going to need to add forestry. But
we're already doing that up in the mountain with the coffee.
Well, we actually have. You're right. We have been restoring the rainforest on Mount Gorongosa. I'm proud of that. But I think we need to look in the other direction, which would be east of the park toward the Indian Ocean. We'll probably need to get involved in forestry there. So, but you know, I'm an optimist, and there are models that show the world getting climate change under control. We can all pay attention to our own lifestyles, you know, and we can adopt clean energy. So we have to remain optimistic.
Yeah, and I think we had our own experiences last year with the cyclone Idai, which was a big wake-up call in the whole climate change. So I think we are starting to open our eyes, open our ears, and being ready to learn and see what we can do to make small changes.
I mentioned that because Cyclone Idai was the biggest cyclone to ever hit central Mozambique. And just in the time that I've been in Gorongosa, we've already seen, we have more floods and more droughts.
Yes.
You know, so the extremes are worse on both sides.
And more frequent.
What's nice about a national park and a massive forest is that it actually mediates climate extremes, whether it's drought or flood. So in Cyclone Idai last year, Gorongosa Park absorbed enormous amount of water.
Yeah.
Because when you have an intact forest and you know, you can absorb that water, so it didn't all run straight down to the people who live south and southeast of us. But also in a drought, a massive forest keeps the area more moist and more shady. Yeah. So that's a great reason to have, even if we didn't have national parks for tourism, which is super fun. You could make a justification for national parks just to have intact ecosystems, just for the greater well-being of the environment around it.
Yeah, and everyone at the end of the day. Let's go to a second question, which is from Melissa, and she says, Greg and Larissa, it is so nice to get to know you. I know that girls' empowerment and education is a huge part of Gorongosa Coffee's mission. What is happening with the program during COVID-19? I have heard some Mozambican towns are using local radio to give some lessons to students. Is anything like that happening in Gorongosa?
Well, you're in Mozambique and I'm 12,000 miles away. So Larissa, I think we're going to let you take that question.
Yes, Melissa. We actually, some of us are working from home. But we have some people who are still working down in the field. We have schools are closed here, so we are not running our extracurriculum activities or after school clubs. But in Gorongosa district, the radio is sending some exercises to the kids. We are also helping with handing exercises and working with the teachers to ensure that the kids have something to do while quarantining at home. So we are trying to keep them busy until school reopens again. In terms of the actual COVID, we've been working with the health system. We've been handing masks to the communities. We've been training APs, which are local community health employees, and they are then how can I say, going into the communities and talking about COVID, talking about the prevention. And so we trying to do our best to keep people informed, also doing prevention measures.
Okay.
And then we have one last question from Kelly, and he says, how did you choose to work with Gorongosa? That's for you, Greg.
Well, I was doing some business in Africa when the internet was first going across the world. I had a company called Africa Online, actually.
Oh, wow.
And so I had been in a lot of African countries. I loved Africa, but I was looking for something to do that would be philanthropic and not necessarily start another business. And I met President Chissano, who was speaking in the United States. He was right at that time the president of Mozambique.
Okay.
He knew I was a philanthropist. He knew I was looking for new things to do, and he invited me. And I think it was really important that I was invited to Mozambique, and that everything I'm doing is with the government of Mozambique, with the people of Mozambique. This is what they call a public-private partnership.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time that I ever saw Gorongosa was in April of 2004. I was in a helicopter. We landed. Everything sadly was destroyed then because there'd been a long civil conflict.
Yeah.
There were no animals. But there, there was a little office and a guest book, believe it or not, left over from decades before. And so I opened up the guest book and I wrote in it, and I said, this could be a magnificent park. It just needs some friends. Or I said something similar to that.
Very nice.
And we still have that guest book. But, and actually, if you go back and look at the early days of Gorongosa, there were some incredible visitors. The astronauts that walked on the moon, believe it or not, went to Gorongosa on vacation.
Wow.
And
one
of them said, and we have it because he wrote it in the guest book. He said, I've been to the moon and I've been to Gorongosa, and Gorongosa's better. And
what?
That's true.
We need to frame that.
Yeah, I think maybe that's it. Maybe we need to sell our coffee that way. We'll let the coffee marketing team work with that. But anyway, so it was easy to fall in love with Mozambique. And for 500 years, Mozambique has been known as Terra de Boa Gente, which is land of the
Boa Gente. Yes.
Mozambicans are kind. They have warm hearts. They have big smiles. They're smart. And boy, it's easy to make friends. It's just been extraordinary for me to have this be really, it's such a big part of my life.
Great. And what do you envision in the, you said 30, you have a 30-year vision. So in 2050, how do you see Gorongosa in terms of tourism?
Well, I would love to think that we can have tourism in 30 years where a lot of people, tens of thousands of people each year get to have this recreational and adventurous and spiritual experience of going into Gorongosa, seeing an intact ecosystem, whether it's a tiny dung beetle or a big elephant, and everything in between. I would love to think that we can have that experience, but I suspect in 2050, all vehicles will be run on green electricity, and there'll be no more petrol.
Very good.
I hope that
hybrid cars.
We'll still have dirt roads. We won't have paved roads. We've got to maintain wilderness. We don't want to start to feel like a big zoo or something. It has to still feel like an adventure where you don't know what's around the corner, and where you watch the birds skimming over the water at sunset. I mean, if people can experience that in 30 years, I think we'll have given a gift to all of humanity.
That's true, and I think people will appreciate that. It's different when you go somewhere where the wilderness is just there and people haven't had much hands on it, and as you said, that surprise, that moment where you see an elephant where you're not expecting, and then you get chased by the same elephant. So I think it's just very exciting, and it will be great to still see that in 30 years, I mean. So Greg, I think we had all the questions. I wanted to ask if you have something you would like to say, something you would like to say to our listeners who are tuning in.
If you're in quarantine somewhere in this world, then you really should order Gorongosa coffee online, and that will not only cheer up your day, but it will send a young girl to school in Africa.
Good. Thank you very much. I will now announce the winner. So we have a winner of today, and her name is Melissa. Well done, Melissa. Thank you for tuning in. Our team will get in touch with you to get you your coffee trio. Thank you everyone else who was with us during these 40 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Greg. It was amazing to get to know you a little more. All your stories are amazing. I hope all the people you mentioned are actually tuned in so that they know that you are thinking of them during the quarantine. And all the best for everyone. We will see you again next week, same time, same place. Stay well and stay in good taste. Thank you.
Thank you, Larissa.